The others, Rebecca included, forgot about the neckbeard creature who wandered around oddly after William and I left the park. But when I went to bed that night, the odor and sight of that seemingly separate species lingered behind in my memory. I mentally catalogued his scent, distasteful though it was, and felt a vague pull on my memory. The pull was toward Maxiki and the Gaxa species. Where prey congregated, the Gaxa and other species would follow, and these predator species tended to mark off their territory by slithering in the area, expelling a foul pheromone, a kind of musk, from the males of the species, indicating that they found a hunting ground that would draw in potential mates with which to build a nest. From there, they would feast on whatever prey was in their territory, and engage in battles with other predators who encroached on their territory. Timid species like the Maxiki only managed to build civilizations at all through rapid reproduction and developing herding methods that let them create diversions for predators. And even so, some Gaxa and other predatory species would still hunt and kill their infants or even adults. Are these neckbeards like Gaxa? I had to wonder. I knew that with the common human taboo on casual nudity that existed in this area, attempting to get near the changing room of the opposite sex was not a good thing. Human taboos are often heavily geared toward reproductive activities, and what is deemed socially inappropriate frequently deals with orifices used for pleasure, reproduction, or childcare. A human female exposing herself to another by choice is a show of confidence and trust in equal measure. Attempting to take that kind of intimacy is considered one of the worst of crimes. It was for that reason that I chose to inventory that smell. In studying the walkers, in the short time I knew them, even though they are immediate family and the older pair are intimate, they close themselves off for privacy in dressing and cleaning themselves. 2. The changing areas for the public are divided by sex. All of this points to a species for which closeness and exposure speaks of considerable levels of intimacy, and which makes such hovering, as Rebecca's description made me think of it, to be dubious at best. When I was sure I had everything ordered in my mind, and there was nothing else to transcribe to my datapad, I slept. I woke up on my own in the morning, and found the house to be almost completely silent. With my hearing being what it was, before I was halfway up the stairs, I heard Michael's cooing noise and Rebecca snoring. But the only sign of wakefulness was William himself, who was standing at the microwave and watching the timer while the countdown hummed on and the contents spun within. "Good mornin'," he said, and gave me a wave of his meaty hand. "Pancakes." I decided to try a dad joke. "I'm Bailey, not pancakes." I watched his face and saw him chuckle. His face formed a toothy smile. "You're doing fine." He reassured me, then asked, "But are you hungry?" "No, I told you I'm Bailey. We've met. I don't know who this hungry person is." I answered as deadpan as I could and crossed one hand over the other while I sat at the table to watch his expression. In some social species, taking on the role or status of another member is deemed an act of challenge. But William only gave me yet another laugh and did a verbal riposte. "Well then, Bailey, would you like to have some pancakes? Fove has already gone to work at the mall, so it'll just be you and me for a few hours." William asked, and slid open the large black bottom drawer of the cold box's frozen section. 2 minutes and 37 seconds later, I had a stack of 3 very thick, fluffy pancakes on a white glass plate, which was smothered in bright yellow butter and dark maple syrup. And when my fork stabbed the top cake, it begged a question that stopped me before I could take a bite. "William, aren't cakes a dessert? Why are we eating cake for breakfast?" He stopped with his fork in midair, the syrup drizzling down from the soaked pancake piece in a single long string that kept it connected to the plate. "Oh, well, that's cake, and this is... well..." He stopped and lowered his fork to his plate. The metal tinked against the glass, and he looked down at his breakfast. His hands held the edge of the table as he thought it over intensely. William, for the record, is recognized as a fairly brilliant man in his field, but this question seemed to stump him. "It is cake made in a pan," he finally answered. "Plus, it has butter and syrup on it, which you don't put on a thicker cake." It was a wholly unscientific answer if ever there was one, and I could not be satisfied with it. My ears went down and I asked, "But how does the use of a thinner pan make a cake into a breakfast instead of a dessert?" William stared down at the pancake as it vexed him, and I persisted. "Syrup looks like a dessert thing, what with all the sugar, so aren't we just putting a dessert topping on a dessert food and eating it early in the morning?" I asked him, and to that he snorted. "I suppose so. I guess anything can be breakfast if you eat it at breakfast time and have nothing else. So, enjoy your dessert before it gets cold. He answered, and resumed eating with obvious satisfaction from the little noises that came from his closed mouth. So it is the time, not the dish, that makes the meal. I will remember this, I said, picked up my fork with all 3 pancakes on it, and tossed them into the air. They sailed up, and I tilted my head back with my mouth open wide, and snapped my jaws down on the 3 at once. Thanks to my mouth being so similar to their dogs and wolves, this was easy, and I was done with breakfast. It was a solid hour before I realized William made a joke when he said, "You really wolfed that down, didn't you?" When we reached the ticket area, and without missing a beat, William drew out the tickets he'd printed out and handed them over to, yes, him. He still smelled absolutely foul, like milk and cheese left too long in the sun. Golf cap still on his head, and a black shirt with a gray wolf howling at a bright white moon. I have been informed by my editor at this stage that I should add one unrelated segment before I relay the events ahead, and that pertains to my use of idioms common among humans. After 50 years, they are so integrated into my vocabulary and speech that I find I can't do without them. Missing a beat is a musical idiom. The idiom can refer to either the music maker making a mistake in the notes they play, or to a dancer whose movements have lost their pattern to the music. Humans are unique in their propensity to create things that seem unnecessary to much of the galaxy. Music, in my opinion, is one of those unnecessary things which is so marvelous that it becomes necessary after only a brief exposure. This patterned noise is meant to guide motion and occasionally induce mating behavior in the species, a behavior I will cover at a later time. For now, it is enough to know that idioms like this can be cross-referenced in the appendix if there is ever contextual confusion in the text that follows. Now, to resume the narrative, the golf cap wearing neckbeard growled at me again. He tried to stare at me, and I looked away. I was fairly sure after reflection that neckbeards were not in fact a different species, and that what had been said before was merely tongue-in-cheek critique, a kind of humor relating to their bizarre behavior. Instead, I concluded that they are a kind of failed human, though whether they do have some kind of hybrid traits with other animals, I wasn't sure at the time. All I was sure of was that I was a guest on Earth. There were no others of my kind on the whole planet, or even the solar system as far as I knew. All I had was my host family, and who knew what could get me thrown off the world and sent home a failure with nothing to show for years of work? So I looked away, so as not to offend the neckbeard, though I caught sight of his smug face out of the corner of his eye. The way he tilted his head back so that he was looking down at me was a form of dominance display I'd seen before. But when I looked away, I saw something I hadn't seen until then. William was glaring at the neckbeard. William wasn't a big man. Truth be told, the neckbeard was taller by a head, but with his glare unflinching and steady, I looked back at the neckbeard and saw that he looked away. They're all like that. He muttered so that only I could hear him and shuffled us away. Like what? I asked. I barely noticed the noise because there wasn't much other than the sound of flowing water. Shallow, cowards, aspiring bullies. He knew you were an alien and probably worried about how you looked to humans, so you were an easy target. Plus, because of your dog-like features, he got to pretend you were really intimidated by an alpha werewolf, or whatever he imagines his true self to be. His derisive snort was conclusion enough, and by the time he finished speaking, we were well away from the rude ticket taker, and we put it out of our minds. Free of the chaos from the other day, I could marvel at the sheer scale of this place. There were arching metal bands with tracks between them that went high into the air by hundreds of feet and curved down toward a pool of water that stretched even farther. This track undulated over a large section of the park, and from where I stood I could just see a series of open double seats, each one linked to another behind it, and a group of humans screaming as it began its rapid descent. Not far from that, I saw a wading pool where people just sat and enjoyed the feel of the flowing water. William kept me walking, I suppose giving me the tour, sort of, before we actually went on anything. And I saw something called the Lazy River, which had just tubes of rubber in which humans lay back and drifted. Tlemesa have something of an affinity for water. It borders on the same affection for it that humans have, and the prospect of just laying in there and drifting was a welcome one. He showed me the bumper boats, which were little boats with rubber rims that small humans piloted over a big pool and rammed each other over and over again. I lingered beside William to watch these small humans wage naval warfare against each other in their little boats, and while I watched, I thought about the Zenti and their brief conflict with the human race. Homo sapiens really are predators of the highest order. These small ones were sweet and cute by human standards, but even now at such an early age, they had violent impulses. The Zenti didn't stand a chance. I thought about what my professor relayed about the way pioneer women eliminated the Gaxa and then chased down the last of them to a nest to eliminate them at the source. I had to wonder, how many prey species evolved intelligence? How many even have the capacity for violence on the human scale? Most predator species don't have the socialization capacity that humans do, even among those who develop intelligence and civilization. How many can even fathom the depths of the human propensity for violence? When I thought about that, I had to really wonder long and hard. How much of a chance does the rest of the galaxy stand when this race really starts expanding? As of now, there are no true empires to speak of. Governing multiple worlds is difficult, as the social skills required simply don't exist for most species. Ruling even a handful of planets is unheard of, outside of a few outlying species who have a single figure that serves as the center of culture and government. Besides that, settling new worlds and growing their populations takes considerable time. It will be centuries before any worlds are fully inhabited. But the Homo sapien species has sent out colonists, or pioneers as they dub themselves, to a dozen worlds. Thankfully, the galaxy is a very big place, and there are endless worlds to settle. But if it came to violence, I watched the glee on these human children's faces as they rammed full speed into each other's little boats, and I already knew the outcome. William was watching my face out of the corner of his eye and seemed to read my thoughts. "It's surprising that we haven't destroyed ourselves before now, isn't it?" he asked me, and I couldn't disagree, but I didn't want to be rude either, so I said nothing. "We managed to make peace with ourselves before it could happen. We'll find a way to live with the rest of the universe. We're not just destructive, we're creative, innovative, and we will find a way." William said it quietly. Had I not 8 ears on my head, even I might have missed it. I never could tell him that this nebulous determination to find some way in the universe was exactly what had me worried at that moment. 50 years later, yes, I love my humans, but I never forgot that moment standing by the giant pool and watching small human children pretend to kill each other. And even now, writing and speaking on my thesis to earn my degree, I tell you this with certainty. No matter how cuddly and loving you find humans to be, never forget that they evolved as apex predators on one of the most dangerous and lethal worlds in the known galaxy. Do not poke them. This may seem ironic in retrospect, given what you are about to read of my next actions, but if you are wise, you will understand that this only emphasizes what I have just said.